You're listening to episode 71, Laurie's story, a son with Tetralogy of Fallot and Fanconi Anemia. Hi, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. When your child is sick, the whole world seems to stop in its tracks. Plans and priorities change, and your number one job becomes figuring out how to get your child well again. For some of us, rest, medications, and relaxation can do the trick. But for others, it takes more. It takes countless doctor appointments, invasive medical testing, therapy, surgeries, the list goes on, and then you still may not have all of the answers or results you were hoping for. This podcast features parents of children that have an illness or medical condition and gives them a place to share their own journeys and experiences. We will talk about the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, but one thing seems to remain the same. Children are resilient and teach us more about ourselves and the world than we could ever imagine. Thank you so much for lending a listening ear and opening up your heart to these families and this podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor.
Our life was chaotic. Everything was life or death. It was so serious and adult. And we were kids. Now I look at 30-year-olds and I think, wow, they're so young. That's so much for young people to have to take on. But that was our life. And we rose to the occasion.
Hello, my friends. I am so happy that you are here today. And I honestly cannot even put into words how amazing this interview is that I get to share with you, that I had with my new friend, Laurie, who is the founder and mom behind Hope for Henry. So if you have ever been in a hospital with kids, there's a good chance that you have run into a Hope for Henry buck. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But I do want to give you a trigger warning that Laurie's son has passed away. It has been 19 years, and he had a illness called Fanconi Anemia, and after a devastating diagnosis of Tetralogy of Fallot. And so we'll talk more specifically about that. But if your heart is not ready to get into the depths of a child who has passed, I feel you. Like, there's a time and place for everything, and that might not be for you today. So wanted to give you a warning. Also, with the caveat, though, that this is really a story of hope and a story of leaning into what is important and the meaning of life. And you'll hear Laurie say that her experience in some ways was wonderful and beautiful. So this is not a depressing, sad story. This is one of hope, and I cannot wait for you to hear it with Laurie. A couple of housekeeping things is that I'd love for you to go rate and review the podcast. It helps more families find us. And then, as always, sharing this with friends so that other people can hear, just good life lessons, and sharing this with the parents that you have in your parent support group, the people that you meet online and are going through something similar. If you're a professional, sharing it with the parents that you serve, so while they're sitting alone in a hospital room, they can hear somebody else go through something similar. It's a game changer. Thanks, guys, so much for being here. And here's my conversation with Laurie.
I am actually a rarity. I'm a born and bred Washingtonian. I've lived here my entire life with the exception of 4 years away for college. But this is my hometown. So my kids are growing up where I grew up. My husband actually is also from here, although we did not know each other growing up. So Washington it's where I'm from, and I'm sure where I will live my whole life. I love it here. We cycle through people every 2 to 4 years, but there are a rare few of us who actually stay here.
That is so
So,
true.
yeah.
I lived in DC for a while. It's actually where I met my husband. We're both Texans, but we worked at the same hospital system in Northern Virginia. And when we first started dating, we would go out and he would leave with guys' numbers. Like, I wasn't worried about him like meeting other girls at the bars. He would meet these guys. He's like, it's really hard to find friends that stick around. So I have to meet
Yeah,
these people at bars.
exactly. That's very funny. That's very funny. So I came back after college, and I, had a really great time in my 20s. I'm sure you did as well. If you met your husband here, I'm guessing you lived here around that time of life.
Yes.
It's a very fun place to live in your younger years. And then my husband and I were friends for 5 years. And I think of us kind of as a couple that resembles the couple in When Harry Met Sally. We were best friends. We talked every single day, but we didn't date. And then about 5 years into it, I realized this man has been in love with me for a long time. And I think I love him too. And 6 months later, we were engaged, and 6 months later, we got married. And, we both we were very fortunate. We had idyllic childhoods, and things were pretty easy for us and for our families. And that was very fortunate. And when we went to, wanted to have a child, it was easy to get pregnant. And I really was an unconcerned pregnant person. I was very athletic, and I worked full time up until the day I went to give birth. And within, not even a minute of our first child's birth, Henry, he was diagnosed with a serious heart defect called Tetralogy of Fallot, which was going to require open heart surgery. And as anyone could imagine, that was completely terrifying. And, we were totally unprepared. I mean, moments earlier, we just couldn't wait to hold our baby for the first time, and, felt a little overwhelmed, like, wow, we've never put a diaper on a baby. We've never put a little T-shirt on a baby. And now all of a sudden, first of all, it took hours and hours and hours for me to even be able to hold my baby, because he was in the NICU and I was in recovery because I had a C-section, and I couldn't see him until I could actually get out of bed and walk down the hall, which was not an easy task after a C-section. And they told us he could turn blue any moment and he'd need to have emergency heart surgery. And it was all of a sudden, like, our life went from this idyllic, beautiful life to taking a 90-degree turn into a crisis. And 2 weeks later, when he was diagnosed with Fanconi anemia, which is an extremely rare, fatal disease, that open heart surgery just seemed like a dream, which is an insane thing to say. I understand. But all of a sudden, with a 2-week-old little baby who looked totally healthy, we knew that he was going to have open heart surgery, and that was going to be the easy part, because at some point in the next 5 years, his bone marrow was going to fail, and he was going to have a bone marrow transplant with a 0% chance of survival unless we had another baby who would be a perfect match for him. Wow. And of course, because Fanconi anemia is a genetic disease, every time we had a child, we had a 25% chance that baby would also have this fatal disease. So our life was chaotic. Everything was life or death. It was so serious and adult. And we were kids. Now I look at 30-year-olds and I think, wow, they're so young. That's so much for young people to have to take on. But that was our life. And we rose to the occasion.
You know, what you just said right there, like everything is life or death. Like living in that type of trauma and crisis. What do you remember about those days? Like how did you get through it?
This is going to sound crazy, but it was meaningful and it was energizing and it was terrifying, but it was wonderful. I mean, it was what life is about, really. And it was purposeful. I mean, Henry was a magical child. And we were prepared. Like, we understood from the moment of parenthood what mattered and what didn't matter at all. So I have never cared what anybody else was doing. I didn't read what to expect in your first year because, like, really? Yeah. Didn't apply. Right. Didn't care. And it was, we were original. We were free from all of that. I'm not saying I would have fallen prey to that anyways, because I'm not someone who follows people really, but immediately there was no playbook for us. And so we followed our instinct, and our instinct was, you know, find someone who will help us reverse Henry's fate, who knows that they can, because we believe we can, which, by the way, is completely crazy, but still, we believed it. Number 2, help as many other people as we can along the way. And number 3, make every day matter. Eat dessert first. And that's how we lived. By the way, we still live that way. Every day people say, like, my kids are like, what's for dinner? I said, dinner again? Every day, dinner.
Yeah.
I know what's for dessert.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's for dinner.
Oh, yeah. What are some of those memories that you have of those early days? Like, what makes you call Henry that magical child? What did he light up inside of you?
So Henry put on a Batman costume for Halloween when he was 1. He didn't take that thing off until he went in for transplant when he was 4.5. I mean, he loved Batman. His little brother Jack, who was just 1 year younger, was his Robin, you know, his sidekick, his best friend.
Yeah. And
everyone in the neighborhood knew Henry and Jack. And one of my friends, when Henry was 1, said, he has a smile too big for his face. And it was true. Like, he was so happy. Oh. And so it was really impossible to be sad around him. He had funny words for everything. He loved adult songs. Like, his favorite song was this Todd Snyder song called Beer Run. And you have to imagine this 3-year-old singing, like, going on a beer run, right? That's funny. He was funny. And he was fun to be with. And he had these, besides Jack, these 3 other best friends from when he met them when they were 2. They still think about him. They still love him. They still are friends with us. Their parents are our closest friends. Like, they just, like, he was someone people felt lucky to know and do not want to forget.
Yeah. This little boy has quite a legacy in what you have developed, and I want to talk about that in a little bit. But Laurie, because you are so articulate and open to chatting about some of the hardest parts, would you talk to us about those hard parts and, you know, speak to those parents who are in the middle of sitting in the waiting room during a transplant or get the news of a diagnosis like Henry's? How do you tell them to get through those moments? What was it like for you?
It was unspeakably terrible. Like when we first heard the words Fanconi, anemia, I was working in affordable housing at the time. My husband was in marketing. That was like a different language. I mean, healthcare was like a foreign language. We didn't even know what that was. When they showed us a picture of a heart with Tetralogy at Fallot and a healthy heart, I couldn't tell the difference. I didn't know which was which, And I remember when the doctor said that Henry had this rare disease, and he said to us, don't look it up, because every study that you find, if it's been published, is out of date. And the success rates are out of date, and they're going to be terrifying. So don't look at that. But I remember scouring, everything I could find just to find something that said it was sometimes fatal, nearly fatal. Because that word fatal was an impossible word to accept. And for me and for my husband, we clung to this concept of hope, that there had to be someone else who refused to accept Henry's fate without a fight. And we had to go find that person, and that was going to be our person. And everyone else, we didn't have time for that. It was a distraction, and it would bring us down.
Yeah.
And we did. I mean, we ended up visiting doctor after doctor after doctor, and we ended up finding someone who I think looked at me and Alan and said, wow, they could be our children. There's no difference between them and our kids. And Henry could be our grandchild. I'm going to help these people. And we ended up being lucky enough to be the first people in the world to try this brand new, unproven technique to try to have a child knowingly who would not have the disease that was not, unfortunately, sometimes fatal, and would be a perfect bone marrow donor for Henry. And it was like science fiction. Can you imagine choosing an embryo that you knew would be a baby that would survive and also save your child?
Wow.
And so that sent us on this medical odyssey for years that was filled with hope and dashed hopes, and then more hope and more dashed hope, and filled the pages of a book that I wrote called Saving Henry. And I think having something to hold on to that had the promise of turning things around made a real difference. And I was lucky too, because as I mentioned earlier, my husband and I were together for 5 years as best friends before we ever dated. And we leaned in on that because we really liked each other. And we were able to have a partnership. And I was talking to someone recently who said that the downfall of a marriage is when you think it's always 50-50, because it might end up being 50-50 over time, but it's usually 80-20, 30-70, So
Right.
when I was having a really hard time, he stepped up. When he was having a really hard time, I stepped up. And, we had other children. And so we had a lot to live for. And we did, so, and we wanted Henry to have a magical life And we hoped it was going to be really long, but we didn't bank on that, I guess.
Mm. So you never lost hope, and that seems.
I think probably there were plenty of people out there who thought we were playing crazy, because Henry went in for his transplant when he was 4.5. We did travel from our home in D.C. across the country to Minnesota, where he had his transplant. At the time, this is back in the year 2000. There wasn't Google. I mean, if you can imagine, right? So you couldn't Google search, can I kiss my kid when they're in the middle of chemo and the transplant? Can he bring his blankie in to his transplant room? We had no clue of anything. And it was scary because, information, knowledge is power. There was no ability to have any knowledge back then until we got there and we were doing it. And I remember we went in and Henry was getting his first IV, the first day of pre-transplant workup. And my dad had given him this plastic sword. And he brought it in, and he's wearing his, Batman costume. And he raises his sword up, and they had, pulled his, sleeve up. And he raises the sword in the air, and he said, "Bring it on." And I was like, this is going to be okay. Yeah. We can do this. We can do this.
Oh, gosh.
But it's very isolating. It's so isolating. For people with kids going through transplant, I don't think anyone could ever understand what that's like unless you're doing it. COVID has been interesting, I think, it's been terrible. So let's just acknowledge that. But it's been interesting in a way because we lived, behind the mask for 2.5 years. And I don't think anyone understood. We couldn't go out in public. We couldn't see anyone. Couldn't go into a coffee shop or a bookstore or a retail establishment. And Henry had to wear a N95 mask, always. And I think when now everyone's having to do that, I was like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
We all did that for years.
Exactly.
Everyone with a transplant goes through a transplant has to do that.
Yeah.
This is not the first time ever that people have had to do that.
Right. So talk to us a little bit about the end of Henry's life and what that was like for his siblings and how you guys turned that and have celebrated his life now through Hope for Henry. We'll be right back. Hey guys, did you know Child Life on Call is more than just a podcast? We have free resources for parents, kids, and professionals. And by the way, a new app coming out in 2022. We will be partnering with facilities to empower and educate kids, parents, and the care team, and we want you to be a part of it. Sign up to have the facility you visit or work for be one of the first to have access at childlifeoncall.com.
So Henry, during that 2.5 years, he would get incredibly sick. I mean, to the point where I remember we were up in Hackensack, which is where his primary hematologist was. We never were home. We would maybe come home for a day and then he'd get a fever. I remember one time we got in the car and we drove up to Hackensack, which is where his hematologist was. And we forgot to bring our Henry and Jack's shoes. You know what I mean? It was just so chaotic. And we lived in hotels and Ronald McDonald houses and people, I don't know where we live, I mean, just everywhere. And we were broke. I was working 20 hours a week for a nonprofit with health insurance. My husband wasn't working anymore because he couldn't keep his job with all of the disruption. So it was was hard, and yet so filled with love and so focused and so real and so and scary. And all of a sudden, I guess we must have been in Minnesota actually. All of a sudden, Henry just couldn't use the left side of his body. And the neurologist assessed him and said he's going to have brain surgery. And I said, well, wait a second. Like, we signed up for a transplant a year ago. We never agreed to brain surgery. And I thought, but what choice do we have? Like, you don't think about it this way, and every family with a sick child knows it. The second you get that diagnosis and you agree to treatment, you're just agreeing to a whole slew of things that you could never possibly anticipate. And so, like, Henry goes in, and I didn't have a chance to, like, choose the best brain surgeon. I chose the best heart surgeon for Henry's heart surgery for Tetralogy, but I didn't get to choose a brain surgeon. It was whoever was on call that minute, you know? And it was terrifying. So, and then he recovered fully, and he started bouncing a basketball, and the doctor was shocked. And we went back home. Yeah. And so I say all this because it would get to this point where you thought there's no way he's going to recover, and then he did. And then he would get sick again and something else, and then he would. And so it was the fall of, he was almost 7, and I felt like something changed, and something was wrong. It's like that mother's intuition. And I took him to Georgetown Hospital, and I talked to his doctor, and I said, I really feel like something's wrong. He's losing weight. He's getting smaller. He's like shrinking. And they couldn't find anything wrong. And I said to Alan, my husband, please just take him back to Minneapolis and just have to, because no one believed me. And I said, just have them look at him. If they say nothing's wrong, then come back home. I had a 5-year-old and a less than 1-year-old. So I said, just fly there with Henry, get him assessed, and come home if I'm wrong. And 2 days later, Henry got a fever. Jack and I flew out there. 2 days later, he ended up in the hospital. My mom flew out with our son, Joe. And then things got worse and worse. We enrolled Jack in school there. We moved into the Ronald McDonald House. Things got worse. And I was in the hospital with Henry, and he coded. And that, it was, it's like one of those things where everything is like, you're in slow motion, and everything is, where like you're having an out-of-body experience. And they rushed him down to the PICU, and he never woke up. So he was there for 5 days. And my family members flew out, and Alan's best friend flew out. And I remember at one point the nurse in the hospital, because the doctor couldn't believe Henry would possibly die. He had seen too much of Henry, and he was like, no, he's going to be okay. And they wanted to put him on dialysis. His kidneys had failed. And I was like, you're not doing a surgery to him. He's in a coma. No. And my husband wanted to, and the doctor wanted to. And I asked the nurse who was there, and I was like, tell me the truth. You've seen kids like this. Is he going to get better? And she said, no. And we were going back and forth, and I was like, I don't know how we're going to resolve this, because we've never not agreed. You know what I mean? And then a test came back, and Henry had a fungal infection in his lungs, which was terminal. And so we never had to disagree about a treatment.
He He decided
which was
for you.
merciful. He decided for us. But you want to know what was so interesting and so poignant? I was with my grandmother, who was beloved to me. And right before she died, she started talking about like the good old days. And the evening, the last evening that Henry was conscious, he and I were sitting in his room, and we were so close, had such a beautiful relationship. And he was talking to me. He had this beautiful little girlfriend, Bella, of course. He met her when he was 2, and he loved her his whole life, and she loved him too. He would go to her ballet recital with flowers, and oh my God. Like, he would insist we have to stop and buy flowers. Yeah. He was a charmer. And he started talking about, like, the best times of his life, like the good old days. And I was like, that is what people do. That's what my grandmother did right before she died. And not an hour later, he went into a coma. But I think he knew. So it was terrible. I mean, I'm saying this, it's been 19 years. I can talk about it, like, with some distance. Like, I know how to do that because of my role at Hope for Henry. But it was paralyzingly horrible. And even though, like, they had delivered that horrible diagnosis 7 years earlier, I had no idea of that he would die, what it would feel like if he died or when he died. And it was worse than I could ever have imagined. I didn't know what to. I had been his nurse, his mom, his friend, his companion. I mean, everything. I gave birth to him. You know what I mean? And he was the driver of our life, what we did, where we were. You know. And like, so he was our life's purpose. I mean, even for Jack and ultimately for Joe, because it's where we were. And we always took the other kids. Like, we didn't leave the siblings home. They were young enough we could take them. So we all were wherever Henry needed to be. And for Jack, Henry's death was devastating. Devastating. He lost his big brother and his best friend. And I don't know. I mean, he's not the oldest child, but he doesn't have an older brother. And he's 24, and that's still hard. I'll tell you something, and he'll probably listen to this, and he's going to hear this. But, like, I know that last night we were celebrating my father's 91st birthday. Oh, my God. And and Alan said something about son number 1. And Jack son number 2. He was talking about son number 2, and he was talking about Joe. But Jack thought he was talking about him. Oh. Because he does not think he's son number 1. He thinks he's son number 2. Mm. Henry's son number 1. Wow. I thought that was so... Joe knew he was son number 2, but Jack thought he was too.
Yeah.
And it's been 19 years.
Yeah.
And it's so painful.
You know, I was talking with a parent this week who had received a pretty devastating diagnosis. And, you know, her thoughts were a lot about the baby. It was an infant, but also about her older siblings. Or the baby's older siblings. And mm-hmm. I just told her, you know, based on my experience in the hospital and working and talking through this podcast with families, the siblings of these children who face rare diseases and chronic illness and multiple hospitalizations or trauma in some way turn out to be the most empathetic, resilient humans in the world. And it sounds a lot like what you're describing about your son.
Amen. Amen. I mean, I wanted to say that because for people listening who have siblings, I do want to say Jack is 24. He went to University of Michigan. He did beautifully. He has so many friends. He's funny. He is a self-taught musician. He plays like 5 different stringed instruments.
Wow.
And he works for Hope for Henry now, which is, dreamy.
Yeah.
And he's wonderful. He's handsome. He's productive. He's wonderful. And he is empathic. He is living probably a different life than he might have lived. He's not shallow. He's not materialistic. He's not selfish. He's, he understands his place in the world because of his life experience. And Joe, who was only 1 when Henry died, so I think his challenge, Jack really knows what he lost. Joe had the pain of losing someone who everyone around him knew so well. And I think for Joe, it's difficult because he didn't know him very well. In terms of establishing an independent relationship. He knows Henry loved him, but he didn't get to experience Henry in the same conscious way. But Joe is 19. He's like a well-known photographer, videographer. He graduated from high school, and he's like working now. But he's like, oh, college not for me. And he's like a professional working, doing the most unbelievable things. So they're good. Yeah. And you want to know what? We learn the most important, I think, messages of parenting, which is what? Love your kids unconditionally. Take time to know them. Don't try and make them into someone they're not or some reflection of you. Get to know them and let them be their very best self.
Wow, I love
that. That is a silver lining. When people ask me, like, what did you do right? And I said, I don't know. We did everything wrong and everything right. That's what we did. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't follow any rule book, but it all turned out just fine.
It's you loved them fiercely for who they are. Because it's like you said, it's just wasted time trying. The reflection of you, what you just said, is so beautiful. And such good reminders for any parent. And really, in any relationship, and a marital relationship too, it's right. Like, I don't need to make my husband be what I want him to be. I need him to be him.
Right. His best him. So you can be your best you.
Oh, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Would you talk with us about Hope for Henry? And if you've listened to the past 2 episodes, we talked, we got to hear detailed experience not only from the family, but from child life specialists. But talk to us about when you started it after Henry's passing and what it's become today.
Yeah, so we started Hope for Henry on what would have been Henry's 8th birthday. I think for me and Alan, the prospect of a birthday without the birthday boy, horrible. And so we needed to do something to honor Henry. And so one of the things that we found, and I think probably most parents of children who have spent too much time in the hospital would agree, that it's pretty easy to get great medical care in the U.S. We're fortunate in that way. But it's very difficult to find any kind of sustained care that recognizes that your kid is a kid. even when they're in the hospital. And that, to really heal, to be able to do all those difficult things that are required of kids to heal, they need normalcy. They need entertaining distractions. They need incentives. And so we started Hope for Henry back in 2003 to fill that gap. And, we started off by providing families whose children were newly diagnosed at MedStar Georgetown, which was our hometown hospital, as well as Fairview University Medical Center in Minneapolis, which I think is now Minneapolis Children's. It changed its name. And Hackensack University Medical Center, with a questionnaire that said, what might make you happy? And a portable DVD player, a Game Boy Advance. That tells you how long ago this was, right?
I love it.
That's like, in the Smithsonian now, I think. An XM satellite radio, again, dating myself, and a digital camera. And all of these items, amazingly, were hundreds and hundreds of dollars back then. Now they're like $50, I think. But anyway, and kids would check the box and immediately get a wrapped gift that said, warning, contents might make you smile. And then they could plug in their DVD player and be watching movies as they're getting their first blood transfusion. And their parents are absorbing this horrible news, filling out reams of paperwork. And we quickly moved from just that to hosting Harry Potter book parties, because I think the 6th book had come out about that time. And then birthday parties. And then we added a room decor program with Dormify as a partner. And then back in 2013, we developed a program that was really built off this concept we created with Henry, which was that we found this magic closet in his room. And if he would take his pills or get another peripheral IV, the magic closet would produce a Batman figure for him. Ooh. He would get rewarded. Okay, and it was, believe me, he would do anything for a Batman figure, little action figure. I mean, we had hundreds of them. And so I worked with Carolyn Fung, who had been our first embedded Hope for Henry Child Life Specialist at Children's National in DC, and we created Hope for Henry Super Path to Super Duper Better. And Super Path to Super Duper Better is sort of how Henry couched how he was doing. He was never sick. He was always somewhere on the path to Super Duper Better. And so we started paying kids in Hope for Henry bucks to do whatever was hard for them. Chemo, radiation, OTPT, drinking, eating, whatever it was. We had a game board. They'd put these beautiful, colorful stickers of Hope for Henry superheroes doing those things. They'd tell us how much they want to get paid, and they'd save up for things, from, a ride-on car to a laptop computer to a little stuffed teddy bear to a Lego set, whatever they wanted, whatever would motivate them to adhere to their medical plan. And that became so successful in terms of improving adherence that the child life specialist using that program at 10 different hospitals said, can you create something similar for procedures to help kids get through MRIs, central line dressing changes, port access, PICC line placements? So we created super rewards for super kids just last year during the pandemic. And we created a new game board, and we actually walk kids through every single step of 14 common but difficult medical procedures. And they get to adhere stickers that show superheroes going through each of those steps. And then they get to put I did it stickers on each step of the way. And at the end, they visit the Hope for Henry Super Rewards for Super Kids cart, and they get to pick something like Kendra Scott jewelry or Funko superheroes or board games or something from Melissa and Doug, like an arts and crafts kit, or a Lids baseball cap from a local team, and get rewarded. And what happens is, number one, their anticipatory anxiety is lowered because they know what's going to happen. They are more cooperative, so their coping skills are improved. They are able to go through MRIs and dressing changes without sedation, which has so many benefits, right? I mean, besides just not having to take the medication and have the negative side effects potentially of that, they don't have to be NPO the night before. The hospitals can use fewer staff. They don't need an anesthesiologist. It's quicker. It's easier on the family. The parents take off less time from work. There's so many benefits, right? And the program has been so successful that we have signed on 5 new hospitals since January. And we, this week, I believe, will enroll our 1,000th patient on that program.
Oh, my gosh. What? That is amazing.
Yeah, I know. And so that is really where we are focusing our expansion. We want to have that program at every hospital in the country because the difference it makes for kids and for child life specialists. It's a prep tool, right? You don't have to show pictures of a huge MRI machine or CT scanner. You can use this to prep kids for the procedure. They can take it home and show the parent who wasn't with them or their siblings or at show and tell at school, like, look what I did.
Wow.
They're so proud.
You should
and
be. That
and
sounds amazing.
It makes them more willing to return to the hospital for whatever they have to do next.
Right. I have to see this.
I will show it to you.
I need to
Please
see
send
this.
me your address. It's available for 14 procedures. I mean, from CT scans to EEGs, lumbar punctures, COVID testing, sedation with IV, sedation with mask, PICC line placements, port access, MRI, proton. I mean, I will send you packets for every one of the procedures because the pathways are different for each one. The illustrations are medically accurate and accessible for kids. And you know what? We've heard from parents or from child life specialists that parents, for whom English was not their first language, were tentative about signing consent forms, and then they walked them through the procedure pathway in Super Rewards, and they understood exactly what was going to happen to their child, and they willingly signed the consent forms, and they could move forward with the procedure.
That is just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. What an amazing resource isn't even the word. It's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
It's a game changer. Yes. I will send it to you. I mean, what we want is more and more people to know about it and to use it.
Okay, so how can we learn more about it? If you're a parent, where do you go? If you're a child life specialist or a healthcare professional, where do you go?
So if you are a parent, you need to ask the child life specialist at the hospital to contact Hope for Henry and get it for you. Because we don't, it's something that you get through Child Life.
Got it.
Because Child Life specialists use it as a prep tool. And if you're a Child Life specialist, contact Hope for Henry. So you can contact info@hopeforhenry.org, and we can schedule a time to talk about it and see if it's a good fit for your program. And we are eager to get it into as many hospitals as possible.
You know, the name Hope for Henry, is so cute because it's got this alliteration, but like based on your story today and talking about having hope, even when there is none, right? Even when you're told this is the outcome, remaining to have that hope is just, it's essential. And I think what you're allowing parents to hear through your story today is that you can keep the hope even when you think there is none, and that it can get you through. And look what it's created. You're 1,000 patients are getting through hard and terrible and uncomfortable and painful things with a smile, which helps their parents.
And
right?
I should say to you that when I say 1,000 patients, that's just for the Super Rewards program.
Right, exactly.
Since 2003, Hope for Henry has actually served 65,000 children.
Amazing. That's just amazing.
I know. And you know what? I have to say, I feel so good about that. And it's so meaningful. And in my most vulnerable moment, I say, I think there's a correlation between the depth of my loss and pain and the number of children who Hope for Henry helps. As I said, he is a magical child and a true inspiration.
Well, I thank you for...
He lives on.
He does. I thank you for being vulnerable and going back to those really hard, tough places in your heart and your mind. I know that that's not easy to do, but I know for certain you are giving hope to so many families, not just who listen to this podcast, but the families that you reach through Hope for Henry. So I thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
Make sure you go to hopeforhenry.org to get in touch with their organization, learn more about Henry's story. You can follow them on Instagram and Facebook at Hope for Henry. And if you are a parent and you don't know a child life specialist that you can reach out to get it into your hospital, just contact me. I'm going to help you figure it out. So let us know. We want to get Hope for Henry supporting you and your child. Get in touch with us, and we will make this happen. We will make this connection. Have a great week, guys. Thanks for being here. Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.